Right away, I knew I had to find a hiding spot and barricade the door as quickly as I could, crouching low and staying as silent as possible. I grew up in a small, quiet town, not in a typical American suburb, but somewhere more rural, where high schools are a lot smaller. Some kids go to schools with classes of 500 or even 1,000 students, but mine had fewer than 200 in the graduating class. It was one of those schools where, even if you weren't friends with someone, you still knew their face and their name. Walking down the hallways, you'd recognize nearly everyone in your grade. That was just how it was in our little town. There wasn't much in the way of wild news stories. Everything was pretty chill, just hanging out after school, playing sports, riding bikes, stuff like that. This was around 17 years ago, though, so I guess everything's changed a lot for kids these days. One thing I always thought was a little different about our school was that bullying wasn't really a huge issue. I mean, you never saw the classic movie-type stuff, kids pushing others into lockers or stealing lunch money. Looking back now, I honestly can't even name a single kid from my class who was a real bully. Sure, some kids teased others here and there, but nothing serious. Every school has the quiet kids, and ours was no exception. But there was one kid in my grade who literally never spoke a word to anyone. Let's call him Tyler for this story. He wasn't weird looking or anything, just kind of quiet, but he seemed gentle enough, nice to those who made the effort to reach out. I shared one class with Tyler, an elective that brought together students from all four grades. It was a computer class, and back then, our school still had those old, bulky desktop computers, kind with huge monitors and loud fans. I remember how the classroom was arranged. There was an aisle down the middle, dividing two columns of tables, each with 4 rows of 4 seats. That meant 32 seats in total, but it never filled all of them. Tyler always sat in the second row, at the far left corner, with no one sitting beside him. Everyone else hung out with friends from their own grades. Sadly, not long into the semester, the seniors in the class started to pick on Tyler collectively, making jokes about how quiet he was or how weird it was. The teacher, from what I recall, didn't really stand up for Tyler, more of a pushover maybe. As the weeks went on, the teasing turned a little nastier. One day, I saw a tiny piece of paper fly from the back row, from a senior, directly onto Tyler's head. He turned around slowly, and the look on his face was hard to describe, almost a mix of sadness, anger, and just total defeat. It made my stomach turn. I felt bad for him, but I didn't do anything about it. Eventually, I saw Tyler sitting outside near the school, on a curb after class. I was walking to my car, and honestly, I just thought I'd ask if he needed a ride. Since my birthday was coming up and I had my license, I figured it was the right thing to do. As I approached, I said, "Hey, what's up? Do you need a ride home?" His face lit up just a little and he nodded yes. We walked toward my car, and then he led me to his house about 10 minutes away. During that drive, we talked quite a bit. I told him to just ignore the seniors in our class. They were a bunch of deadbeats anyway. He sighed and admitted they weren't the only ones who annoyed him. Turns out, he was sick of being picked on in multiple classes, not just that one. Honestly, hearing that made me feel even worse for him. In those 10 minutes, I got to know Tyler a little better. Seemed like a decent kid, really. When I dropped him off, I jokingly said how close we lived, and we waved goodbye. After that, we'd say hello in class most days. But I have to admit I never really got involved when those kids picked on him. One day, Tyler didn't show up to class. It was our computer class, the 4th period, and I had a weird feeling. Later, during 7th period, the loudspeaker crackled and blared, "Lockdown. This is not a drill." I remember everyone freezing. People looked around nervously. Our teacher looked the most scared I'd ever seen. Hirsch ran to turn off the lights and told us to huddle in one corner of the classroom. We sat silently in the dark for what felt like forever, probably between 20 and 30. Minutes until another message came through the loudspeaker. It was the principal, explaining that someone in a mask, carrying a black duffel bag, was trying to get into the school. Our security was pretty tight, but when they spotted this person approaching with what looked like guns or weapons, they locked all the doors. That day, school was abruptly cut short. Once police arrived, I remember a few friends and I went to my place to hang out. Honestly, I don't remember every detail afterward, but I think that night, I woke up to a faint tapping on my window. I looked outside and saw someone on the other side. My heart started racing. I froze for a second, then called out, "Who is it?" to get a better look. To my shock, I heard Tyler's voice on the other side. My stomach sank all over again. I crept closer and cracked the window open just a little, asking, "What are you doing?" "How did you find me?" he whispered through the window. I was trying to do something bad. It clicked instantly. It was him. My mind raced. There was no denying it. I blurted out, "Did you cause the lockdown?" He nodded. I was terrified to ask what his plans were instead, so I just asked how he found me. He admitted he remembered. I said I lived near a deli, then biked around the neighborhood until he found my car. I told him he shouldn't come in, and I couldn't hear what he was planning to do. I even suggested he go to the school and tell them himself, but he didn't want to leave. He kept trying to convince me and even knocked on the window again, looking desperate. I shouted, "Dad," loud enough to scare him off, which worked. I then ran to wake my parents. My mom insisted I call the police right away. When the officer came, I told the truth about Tyler, his visit, and what he admitted to. The police knew about the lockdown already. They likely went to his house that night. When they found him, he confessed everything. I remember hearing he'd been involved in some plans to do harm, but he got cold feet, or at least that's what I hope. I just hope Tyler got the help he needed. This all happened in 2016, back when I was in 5th grade. If you remember that year, you probably recall all the freaky clown sightings that flooded the news and social media. Most adults thought it was just some dumb trend or prank, but for us kids, it was genuinely frightening. I was sitting in elementary school in a quiet suburb. Nothing weird had ever happened before. It was about 1 p.m., nearing the end of the day, and we were working on some assignment quietly. Suddenly, one of my classmates blurted out, "There's a clown outside." Her voice was high-pitched and sharp. We all looked out the window, and yes, there he was, standing just a few feet from the window, facing us. He was in a big, dirty clown suit, with white face paint and black around the eyes. Smiling in that fake, creepy way, he just stared inside. After a moment, he slowly started waving, and some students thought it was funny. Others looked genuinely freaked out. Our teacher, Mrs. Rogers, saw him and immediately went to the window. She looked at him for a second, then snapped, "Everyone, sit down. We're in session. Go back to your seats." The clown didn't react, just kept waving, smiling blankly. Mrs. Rogers quickly told us to sit down and said she was calling the office. She grabbed the corded classroom phone and stepped into the hallway to talk quietly. If you know those old phones, you'd realize she had to step outside the room to make the call. She came back after a few minutes, hanging up and pulling the blinds down. The clown was still there, doing the same weird wave, just staring in. Almost right after, the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Teachers, please get your classrooms into lockdown formation." That note of urgency was clear. This wasn't a drill. Mrs. Rogers hurried to turn off the lights, told us to hide under our desks, and shut the door. Everyone stayed silent. Some kids giggled nervously, but most of us were pretty scared. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, maybe about 30 minutes, until suddenly the principal's voice returned, saying the lockdown was over. The police confirmed the clown was gone. That was it. Classes went back to normal, though everyone was buzzing about it that afternoon. Teachers didn't say much, but I knew something serious had happened. As I was walking home afterwards with my friend Chris just a few blocks from school, a couple of 5th grade girls behind us ran past, looking terrified. One of them yelled, "There's someone in the woods." Curious and scared, we turned around. Behind the school, there's a small patch of trees, not deep woods, just enough space to hide behind. And there, near the edge of the woods, I saw him, against clown. Same dirty outfit, painted face. He was partially hidden but clearly waving, almost calling to those girls. It was obvious he was trying to lure them over. Chris and I didn't say a word, we just bolt out of there and sprint home. I told my parents immediately and they called the police again. Later, I heard that cops arrived once more, patrolling the area, but they never found him. To this day, no one knows who that clown was or what he was really up to. The creepiest part: after the lockdown, he stayed hidden in the trees, watching kids go home. This recent tragedy took place about a year ago, here on the outskirts of Philadelphia, where I live now with my son, and my stepdaughter took my best friend's daughter in after her mom was murdered. That happened in 2016, and her husband, her killer, made headlines. He's now convicted of multiple murders and faces life in prison without parole. I work as a middle school teacher at my son's school, which is pretty close to where I live. His grade is a year below, and my stepdaughter's is a grade above, so our classrooms aren't far apart. The incident happened on March 30, 2020, right in the beginning of the COVID lockdowns. My school was pretty remote, about 10 miles from the next school, 2 miles from the nearest gas station, and 600 meters from the closest park. We were one of the last schools to go into lockdown. That was a hectic Monday. I was teaching math for 6th graders, and suddenly I got a notification on my phone. Someone was there to pick up my stepdaughter. The system sends alerts when someone tries to pick up a student, especially if it's not supposed to happen. My heart stopped. My stepdaughter was 3 classes away from me, and no, she hadn't been scheduled for any pickup. I saw that the person trying to get her was her biological dad, but that was impossible because the school didn't have his info on file. A few minutes of silence followed on the line, then they said they'd check with the principal. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I phoned her classroom, asked for her to come to my room, and just as I was about to hang up, she rushed in, probably pulled by someone on the staff. Then, nearly 10 minutes later, the siren sounded. Lockdown. I instructed the class to barricade the doors and windows, and we all sat quietly in the corner, trying to stay calm. I had a strong feeling about who this was about. We stayed locked down for nearly 46 minutes. When it finally lifted, police were everywhere. I was escorted out by officers and questioned about how I knew her father. I explained that I'd recently taken my best friend's daughter in after her mom's death, and I told the full story. The cops told me that the details about how he got out were terrifying. During transport, a prison bus was hit by a fleeing car that swerved in and crashed into it, killing 10 inmates and injuring the guards. The police were already at my house, waiting for her father, but he never arrived. When news broke, I learned that he'd been involved in a violent escape. This is all still fresh in my mind. It's been more than 4 years, but I still think about it often. I went to a regular public high school in a suburban town, with drills every couple of months. I remember the moment it happened like it was yesterday. It was a Wednesday, 4th period earth science class. We just finished a quiz when suddenly the loudspeaker blared. "This is a lockdown. Lock all doors, turn off lights, stay quiet." At first, everyone thought it was just another drill. Mrs. Chen, our teacher, sighed and moved quickly to lock the door and shut off the lights as usual. She told us to hide in the corner, away from the door. Then, a second announcement came. "This time more rushed, more urgent. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The room went tense, everyone going silent. Mrs. Chen kept her eyes on her phone, nervously checking for updates. Moments later, we heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, then a gentle knocking. 3 soft taps. The knob turned, but the door was locked, of course. Whoever was outside kept trying, turning the handle slowly, not aggressively, just checking. Then a male voice from outside whispered through the door, "It's just a drill. You can open the door now." We looked at Mrs. Chen. She put her finger to her lips, shook her head, and motioned for us to stay quiet. The knocking persisted, growing a little more insistent, and then the man outside started saying hello. I was trembling, I swear, my legs feeling like jelly. The door stayed locked and we all kept silent until finally the knock stopped. For a long 5 minutes nothing happened. Then we heard voices shouting commands from police officers in the hall, telling everyone to stay put. When they finally unlocked our door, we moved out in a line, escorted past other classrooms. Outside there were cop cars everywhere and a SWAT van. I saw an officer leading a guy in handcuffs, probably in his 30s, with long hair, dressed dark. Later, I learned someone had snuck into our school through a side door, right by the science wing, during a delivery. The guy was definitely unstable, and he had something in his backpack, whether a weapon or not, I'm not sure. The authorities didn't tell us much, just that no one was hurt and everything was under control. Still, I won't forget that knocking, or the way he turned the handle, or that scream I heard down the hallway. It never felt quite under control, honestly. And just a few months ago, I was only 15, starting my sophomore year at Northside High in Jacksonville. That morning, I arrived early, around 6:55, one of the first in my chorus class, tucked at the end of the arts hallway next to the auditorium. I was sitting at my desk, listening to music on my phone, waiting for class to start. Then I heard my teacher, Mrs. White, say something. I paused my music and took out my headphones. Looking up, I saw my classmates heading into a closet at the back of the room, the same closet we'd practiced lockdown drills in the day before. Still unsure if it was a drill or real, I followed them in. The teacher shut the door and turned off the lights. We sat in total darkness, the only light coming from a tiny space under the door. I was feeling nervous but tried to stay calm. If I stayed quiet enough, maybe I wouldn't freak out. I listened hard for anything outside, but all I heard was silence. We stayed like that for almost 2 hours until about 8:45 a.m., when the lockdown was finally lifted. When we came out, everyone's nerves seemed a little calmer. I went back to my desk, flipped my music back on, and tried to act normal. Later, I asked my teacher what had happened. "Were there any fights today?" I inquired. She looked at me seriously and said, "It's much worse than that." That's when I realized something big had gone down. I looked outside and saw a bunch of cars lined up in the parking lot, initially thinking it was just pickup traffic, but it felt different. Soon, several students told me someone had been stabbed in the cafeteria. I didn't get all the details then, but my mom texted me later she was already at the school, worried sick. When I finally got to her, she was shaken, and I felt just as messed up. We went to my mom's workplace, her daycare, and she and her coworkers comforted each other while I sat outside to collect myself. I put my headphones back in, turned on some 3 Days Grace, and tried to clear my head. Later on, I looked up more info. I found and watched a press conference about what had happened. That night, my mom took me to Arby's for some food I'd skipped eating all day, and afterward, we picked up my little brother from his middle school. He told us he saw a lot of cops around but didn't know what was going on. Once home, I kept searching the news. That's when I saw the charges. A 16-year-old was booked for manslaughter, assault with a deadly weapon, and other serious crimes. Someone had recorded the stabbing and posted it on Snapchat. I didn't watch it, but my mom told me it was horrifying. Someone running, screams ringing out, all caught on video. She also suspected it might have been gang-related. Since hearing all this, I've been scared, worried about retaliation or more violence. I didn't even know the kid who died, but I still think about him all the time. I hope he's resting peacefully.